It's Tuesday on the Locked On Steelers podcast, and that means we got stars and skulls grades. But before we talk about that, we got to talk about the report that came out about Matt Canada getting a quote-unquote more prominent role. What's really behind that? We've got Alan Saunders from SteelersNow.com. It's going to be a fun episode. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And as I said before, we're joined by Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. You can find all his work there. Alan is still in an airport in Las Vegas as we record this Monday night. He is working diligently the day after the game to get a lot of work done, as he always does. But Alan, I got to lead off asking you your opinion about this report that came out from Dalton Schults over the weekend, saying that source within the Steelers organization say that Matt Canada has begun a quote-unquote more prominent role with the offense, and that he is working more directly with Kenny Pickett. And I kind of just laughed it off. I just like tweeted a joke about it. But a lot of people are like, what? Why would he get such a thing? What is he doing? And Alan, when I saw this report, my first thought was, what more prominent role do you have than offensive coordinator in the first place? That's the whole point of when he got promoted from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator, that was the prominent role. Now, if this report was, hey, you know what? The Steelers scheduled a few more meetings for him to sit down with Kenny Pickett throughout the week, that would make a lot more sense. But I didn't understand this. What was your take on it?
Chris, breaking news. Joe Biden is taking a more prominent role with the United States government. So, what's happening here? I mean, listen, okay, is there something here that, or could there be something here that is worthy of a story? Maybe. I'm not saying there isn't. It's plausible, okay? Is it a more prominent role? No. Like, there is no such thing as a more prominent role. First of all, I mean, you are the offensive coordinator. You are the number one guy. So, second of all, it's not like Mike Tomlin is over there micromanaging the Steelers' offense. It's not like this would be like last year's New England Patriots, where like everyone just kind of understood that Bill Belichick was calling the shots and there was sort of a figurehead offensive coordinator. That's not what the Steelers have had. Matt Canada has been doing basically what he wants with this offense since the day he got hired. So there is no possible more prominent role. Now, could they shuffle some duties around to get Matt Canada some more face time with Kenny Pickett, some more one-on-one time if he thinks there's some things that he could work on, that he could fix, that aren't being fixed with the guys that are working with him on a daily basis now? Absolutely. But that's like this big story instead of like that big story.
And that's the thing, is that I don't think that Dalton Schults was reporting anything false. I think that it was just the way that it was worded triggered so many Steelers fans into saying some crazy stuff and thinking some crazy stuff. Because listen, there's still a lot of animus towards Matt Canada, and you know, whether or not it's justified, it exists. To the point that we heard the fans last week during the Browns game, chanting to fire him. And you hear that report and it makes you think, okay, what are the Steelers doing? I think it's simply this. And if this is the actual adjustment that's happening, I'm all for it. I think what's happening is Matt Canada, I've said this for a while, my biggest problem with Matt Canada isn't the plays he calls. There's some of them that I think are a problem, but you know what? Matt LaFleur calls dumb play calls for the Packers. Everybody messes up.
I say this all the time. The Steelers fans have hated every offensive coordinator since Ron Earhart. Like, they all do dumb stuff sometimes.
It's part of the nature. If your offense ain't top 10, your coordinator is hated. But I think what's happening here, and I think the big problem that Matt Canada's had, is I don't think he's been able to connect with any of the quarterbacks that have played under him during his tenure to get them to see exactly what he's trying to do and grasp the plan. And that's no easy task. That's what I think the biggest difference between good quarterbacks and bad quarterbacks across the NFL is understanding and using the plan of attack. But the way I take this report is he is just being focused more into accomplishing that. It's not necessarily the play calls themselves. It's making sure your quarterback understands why you're calling this play, when you're calling this play, and making sure that he is seeing exactly what it says. And if that's what happened leading up to this game, I think we at least saw a step forward from Kenny Pickett. So again, if this report is true and if it's the way I'm interpreting it is correct, I think it might have been something to help Kenny Pickett move forward.
Well, I think that makes sense. Like we talked about this way back in the offseason. I think the biggest case against Matt Canada is not most of the things that people bring up. It is not the play calls or the jet sweeps or his motion or whatever. It's that he's never developed a quarterback before. He has no track record of doing this, and that is the most important job on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense right now. There's no more important job than making sure Kenny Pickett turns out to be the best version of himself. And I think if you want to be super critical of Matt Canada, the best thing you can point out is that he's never done that before. He's never even really done it in college. There's no reason that we should believe that he can. Not saying that he can't, okay, but there's no track record of success to bank.
Right.
Okay, so when Kenny Pickett comes out the first 2 games and in my eyes regresses from where he was last year, I mean, look, that's it. Everything you want to talk about the offense for the first 2 games, none of it matters other than that. That is the thing that this offense needs to accomplish this season. And if it doesn't accomplish it, Matt Canada is going to get fired. If we end the season and Kenny Pickett has a passer rating in the 70s, that's the end of Matt Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period. Okay,
and it should be.
And it doesn't matter if they win 1 game or 16 in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, they want to win the game in front of them. They want to accomplish their team goals. But for him to continue in his role, that needs to happen. And so it makes a ton of sense for him to be personally involved in that mission. But, I mean, you and I are practice all the time. You were at training camp all the time. I never got the sense that he wasn't personally involved in that. Like, if you saw Kenny Pickett with one person over the last 6 months, it was probably Matt Canada. I mean, maybe Mike Sullivan. But he's with him all the time. It's not like, I'm the offensive coordinator. Nice to meet you. I don't know how much more involved he could be.
No, I'm right with you, Alan. I think that what's happening here is when a report goes out and it says one thing and people read certain words, certain languages will lead it to interpret it. And that's part of the internet. A wildstorm starts and it gets more attention to the story. So, and again, this isn't me banging on Dalton Schults. This is me just trying to kind of address a question that a lot of people had going into Sunday night. But before we continue, I want to get your thoughts. What was your thoughts on how the offense looked Sunday night? We'll get to the players aspect, but as far as like what was called, the play actions, the runs, the different things you saw, did you feel like this was, the best that we've seen in the first 3 games? About the same? How did you feel about Matt Canada and what was schemed up?
Forget the first 3 games. I think it's the best we've seen, period, with Canada and Kenny Pickett. In terms of, look, it's not always going to go according to plan. Like that's not the way the NFL works. Okay, everybody's good plan fails sometimes. But I think this is the first time we've actually been able to see the plan. Like we can identify it as outsiders and see, oh, this is what they were trying to do here. Right? It was a very clear plan. They wanted to establish the run. They didn't care if that run was hyper successful on a per carry basis. They wanted to establish their ability to run the ball and stay on schedule. They did that. And then they built off that with screens and play action and the things that you do. And they stayed on schedule. They didn't get Kenny Pickett into obvious pass rush situations, which at the end of the game, he has fewer mistakes than Jimmy Garoppolo does. Jimmy Garoppolo is only the quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders because he's not supposed to make mistakes. He does not have any upside. He is not a young guy. He's only there to not screw it up. He made the mistakes, and Pickett didn't. And I think a big part of that was the scheme keeping him on schedule and keeping him out of those big bad pass rush downs that Garoppolo got in too frequently. It made sense, and that doesn't mean it was perfect. There was lots left on the bone, but I really think that's the first time we can say that. Maybe ever.
I you know what? I think maybe ever. That's a good point by you, and I think that if that's the start of something, that will be the story. Was that this would be the week that the rise of Kenny Pickett and Matt Canada actually began, but they got to stack good performances. We talked about this throughout training camp. It wasn't enough to have one good training camp or one good preseason game. They had to stack them. And what I think built a lot of people's confidences was that there was stacking of wins, whether it was practices, whether it was preseason, whether it was reps. It was the consistency of winning from the offense and Kenny Pickett that built people's confidence. If this is the start of that for the regular season, maybe it can lead to some real offensive success. We'll talk about the offense and a lot more parts of it, of the Steelers team, when we do Stars and Skulls, because it's grades day here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll get to that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Alan Saunders, so don't go anywhere. But first, before we go anywhere else, got to remind you guys, we're brought to you by Nutrafol. Now, Nutrafol, if you don't want to have to choose between just better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol is a product that's going to provide whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair with no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and a free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, it's time to get the grades. Let's start with the bad first so we can get them out of the way and we can start to get to the good grades. The bad, let's start with our one skulls. Now, before we get into it, I want to remind people of our normal rubric here. Our stars and skull system. It just, instead of calling A, B, C, Ds, we just have different stars. If you have 1 star, you had a good play with a decent day. 2 stars means you had a great play with a good day, and 3 stars, it was like an elite all-time performance. 1 skull in the reverse, it's bad play. So 1 skull is a bad play. You didn't really redeem yourself. 2 skulls, bad game as a whole. 3 skulls, you were all-time terrible. So let's start with this. I'll first say I didn't have any 3 skull grades in this game, and I know that some people might feel that there might have been 1 or 2 people that were deserving of them. I gave more people 2 skull grades if I was looking at it. But let's look at my 1 skull grades real quick, and I want to get your thoughts here. Not too many 1 skull grades, and I think that was a sign of how much of this was a team win for the Steelers. But the people I gave the 1 skull grades, I gave Connor Hayward, DeMarvin Leal, and Quan Alexander. I felt like Connor Hayward didn't, really add much to the game. The one time he got the ball, he got stuffed. That wasn't all his fault. But even when he was run blocking for the team, I didn't see him doing too much. DeMarvin Leal, though, I think DeMarvin Leal is a talented guy. I think that he did not play well against the run in this game, and that came back to bite him. The other guy, Quan Alexander, he wasn't on the field a ton all the time, but he wasn't. I thought there were some plays that he missed out there for the Steelers. Also, I would have put DeMonte KZ on this list. I forgot to add him in on my 1 skulls when I was adjusting things around because he missed a tackle. I didn't think that he added a whole lot more to it. But Alan, what say you about my 1 skulls here?
I agree with Hayward and Leal. Hayward, in addition to not doing much of that run, there was that one route where it looked pretty clear to me that he ran the wrong way. He turns left, Pickett throws right. It was nearly a pick 6. That's a big mistake. Again, Leal, the penalty on the kick on the field goal could have been absolutely hugely cost the penalty if Josh McDaniels didn't disconnect from his controller or whatever happened there.
Whatever happened.
I'm not don't need to get into that, but you can't make those kind of mistakes without doing something else. And I didn't think either of those guys did enough other than that to make up for that. I'm not sure that I would have Alexander or KZ in this group. I actually thought KZ was quiet in a good way. He didn't do much, but for safety, I'm kind of okay with that. I think that's generally a sign like, hey, there weren't just guys running free, and they played a lot of zone.
This is true.
I didn't see a lot of balls go in his direction, and so I was okay with quiet in a good way for him. If Alexander missed a tackle, I didn't see it, so I haven't had a chance to watch the game again, not at least like fully yet. So I'll go with that. But in general, I thought the linebackers probably had their best game of the 3 as a collective. And they've been on that list, and they were not. So I'm okay with that.
I hear you on that. Let's go to my 2 skull grades and some familiar names here. I got a lot of linemen here, pretty much all linemen here. 3 offensive linemen, Dan Moore Jr., Chuks Okorafor, and Mason Cole. Isaiah Loudermilk, the defensive lineman. Loudermilk, man, you and I saw some really good stuff from him in camp, and he has just disappeared. And it's kind of disappointing because he was looking like the depth piece in the defensive line that could really give guys a blow, and now he's becoming more of a liability out there.
Yeah, I actually think I might only give him 1 skull instead of 2. I think it'd be a little more lenient. I don't think he should have been playing in this game. It was not a very good matchup for him. They brought Braden Fajoko up from the practice squad.
It should have been Braden Fajoko, yeah.
You knew it was going to be a big run-stopping game for that defensive line. Leal is starting, and I think Leal deserves to start in place of Cam Hayward, but he is the smallest lineman that they have. So why wouldn't you want one of your backups to be a bigger guy? I mean, Loudermilk is probably the second smallest, right? I mean, he's certainly the lankiest, lanky. You know, I thought they put him in a bad situation that he was not able to win, but I'm not going to fully fault him for that. The offensive line, at least Chuks has the benefit of he was going against a really good player, even though he didn't win very many of his reps. At least he can sit here and say, well, that's Crosby. The rest of those guys, that's not a very good Raiders defense, and they could not open holes in the running game. They didn't protect Kenny Pickett. I'd have been fine with all 5 members of the offensive line. I thought Seumalo, this was the first time he really looked like he's capable of playing. But the other 4, I'd have been okay with the other 4 all being on here, to be perfectly honest.
I thought Isaac Seumalo had a better performance. I will go over him and James Daniels. I think Daniels kind of held it down while Seumalo was the guy that kind of charged up what few successes they had. But again, looking back at this, my problem with Chuks Okorafor is, man, there were some plays that he just stopped moving his feet. And like that's how guys would beat him. There was one play where James Daniels kind of pushed Max Crosby around him, and Chuks Okorafor just let him go around. And if his feet are still moving, he can adjust with it because his feet were in like cement. Max Crosby goes around him and he gets Kenny Pickett and it blows up a drive. That's my problem with Chuks Okorafor is that I think we're seeing a breakdown in his fundamentals, and his fundamentals for years I thought has been his biggest strengths. You know, he wasn't a killer on the offensive line, but he was going to make sure to do all the little things that you couldn't kill him. And that was my biggest problem with him. Mason Cole, I think he's just really struggled to start this season, which is a real shame because I thought he really came on strong and helped stabilize the line last year. But you're seeing him miss a lot of blocks as you're seeing Dan Moore Jr. miss a lot of blocks. There was that one play, a screen pass to Calvin Austin, and you have both Dan Moore Jr. and Mason Cole out in front of him with the safety coming up, or I think a linebacker that was a converted safety coming up. And all they have to do is just get their hats on 2 guys, and there is nobody in front of Calvin Austin. He could have had another 50-plus yard touchdown with his speed. I just don't know what has happened to this offensive line to see so many guys lose steps that we saw them gain last year.
Yeah, it's really discouraging, and I can't put my finger on what it is, but this is really 3 in a row for me. You're talking about the line in general that has been well below where I believe realistic expectations for that unit should have been for this season. I don't think there's any question that there's disappointment from within the team. Again, they have gone up against good edge rushers. Cleveland's entire defensive line is extremely good. That's not what this was this week. This should have been a better week for that unit, and they weren't able to put it together.
I'm right with you. We'll get to our star grades in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. There were quite a few of them, but where were they placed? 1, 2, or 3 stars? That could be the fun conversation here. We'll get to that after the break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. But first, I want to remind you guys, we're brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 sports book in all of America, so get ready for this NFL season by getting into the #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's get to our star grades. And we're going to go in reverse order because I have a few 3 stars, a couple 2 stars, and then a bunch of 1 stars. So let's get with the 3 stars. I think they're kind of obvious. TJ Watt, I think this is my third straight 3-star performance for him. And it makes sense. He got 2 more sacks, and even on the plays he wasn't getting sacks, he was the guy that was in Jimmy Garoppolo's face on Patrick Peterson's interception. He just continues to be a game wrecker. I think he's right on pace to be the defensive player of the year, so long as he keeps this up. He's got 3 sacks through 6 games. I think the stat was he is the first NFL player to have 6 sacks through 3 games. Excuse me. So I think he's the first NFL player to get 6 sacks through 3 games with a defensive touchdown in NFL history. That's a lot of stuff there. I just think, before we get to the specialists, I just want to hear from you, Alan. TJ Watt. There's few other things. We're not even surprised by anymore. It's just what he does.
So he is. And I thought, it really went beyond the stats in this one. I thought he was impacting throws when he wasn't getting home. I think the Patrick Peterson interception was all him, basically. I mean, he makes – and I said, so when we're talking about Pickett, Jimmy G made mistakes. The whole MO of Jimmy G was he hadn't been sacked in this game, fairly low interception rate as a starter. Like, his whole MO was just doesn't make the big mistake. And the Steelers sacked him 4 times, made him throw 3 interceptions. And I think TJ Watt was absolutely the biggest part of that. The Raiders' offensive line just could not block him. It was a phenomenal performance, and the third in a row. Like, I can't be surprised by it anymore. I don't know if it's possible to keep this pace up, but he doesn't even need this pace to be a runaway defensive player of the year.
I'm right with you.
This pace would be 34 sacks. Just we should say that. That's
like exactly
12 more than the record.
He is on pace to have 34 sacks this season. That's like playing Madden on franchise mode and just continuing to rack them up. It's ridiculous. But my other 2 players who made 3-star grades were the specialists, Chris Boswell and Presley Harvin. Boswell just cash money this year. It seems like whatever he was going through last year has been resolved. Presley Harvin, whatever he's been going through in his career, looks like it's been resolved, at least in the last 2 games. The first game he still struggled, but he had some booming punts. And there was one punt that he didn't have, and I almost removed the 3-star grade for it, but I thought he totally redeemed himself in the last punt of the game when he put the Raiders far back. This is when there was 20 seconds left or so, and he put so much hang time on that punt, and it led to a muff. The Steelers almost recovered, but I think this has been the best we've seen the Steelers specialists play in back-to-back games in quite a bit.
This is a dominant special teams performance. I think not enough people are talking about how good they were. Boswell was a 57-yarder.
Yeah.
That's silly. And it's good from 60, probably 65. Harvin's been great these last 2 games. I struggled in the opener. He's been awesome these last 2 weeks. There's no doubt in my mind that he has always had the leg to be a weapon. It's just been the consistency with him. We're not going to make big declarations about 2 games, but it's been 2 really good games. If he can keep that up, he can absolutely be a very good player.
Absolutely. Now our 2-star grades, only 2 players I got here, both on the line. One, Isaac Seumalo, because I felt like he was the one presence on the Steelers offensive line that was like, we are going to block somebody today. And I thought he did that. The other guy I have, though, on the other side was Keanu Benton, who, Allen, I thought he was wrecking shop up front in the run game. The sack that he got a holding call that if he wasn't held, it was going to be a sack. I've been very impressed by Keanu Benton. I know everyone's talking about Joey Porter Jr. not playing enough and Broderick Jones not starting, but man, Benton has really come on strong.
He's been awesome, and that sack was so clean. And what a perfect clean win. Goes and gets a quarterback. He's been really good, and I think, to me, that's the other reason that Fehoko should have been in this game, because I think they could afford to move Mon Adams to the end. I think you could have rolled with just Benton and Fehoko at nose tackle, and you get the bigger guy at Adams, who's also played really well. I thought he had a really good game too. I'm sure. Well, maybe we'll see. I think he should be in the next page. Let me just say that. I think that would have been a better way to approach the defensive line. I think Benton needs to play more. I understand what Mike Tomlin's doing, and not trying to give young guys more than they can handle, but he's handling everything he's getting, and I think he's ready for more.
I agree. I think he's ready for more. Before we move on to this next page here, is Mike Tomlin being too cautious here with these rookies? Because Benton's getting in there a lot, Washington's getting in there a lot, but Broderick Jones still hasn't seen a start, and I don't think we can say that either of the tackles have had a really good start to the season. And we'll get to the corners in a sec. I thought that they certainly stepped up in this last game, but Joey Porter Jr., he went from 7 snaps in game 1, 14 snaps in game 2, 27 snaps in game 3. He's been targeted 5 times, given up 1 catch for 12 yards, and has a pass breakup. Is Mike Tomlin being too cautious with these guys right now?
I don't think so. I think you're seeing a nice, steady progression. I think you're seeing guys get given small jobs, right? How many catches does Darnell Washington have? He's played, but he's not really running a lot of routes, right? Benton started just nose tackle. Okay, then there's an injury. He was playing well. Now we're seeing a little bit of 3-tech. Porter right now just a dime. I think this game, so Levi Wallace gets hurt. He plays 1 series at outside corner. I think that's the idea they had for all these guys. I don't think this is a really well-regarded rookie class, and I think all of the players had potential to be immediate impact kind of guys. But I don't think they had anybody that was like a week 1 surefire upgrade over the guys they had. And especially when you're talking about like outside, like Porter, there's a lot of value in keeping the ball in front of you. There's a lot of value in not making the big bad mistake. And I think in these very winnable games, that there's reasoning for that. I did think when San Francisco got out of hand, that was a place that they could have maybe leaned on these guys a little bit and gotten some ears wet. I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. I probably would have put some young guys in late in that game. But other than that, I think he's pretty much got him on the right track.
I hear you on that. Let's get to the 1-star grades here. And like I said, there's a lot. It's the basic. And here, this was why I thought this win was impressive, was that it wasn't dominant performances from a lot of people, but a lot of guys were just doing their jobs. And that was a sign of like, hey, they're able to win in some important spots here. So let's start with the 2 running backs. I thought both had some really good flashes. I almost gave Jaylen Warren two stars with the way that he was catching the ball. But both him and Najee Harris, I think they are developing into a really good 1-2 punch. If the offensive line gets it together, they are going to be a problem. I think that they're in a good pace. Let's address the secondary as a whole here. I gave Minkah Fitzpatrick 1 star. I gave Patrick Peterson 1 star. I gave Levi Wallace 1 star. I also gave Keanu Neal 1 star. I looked at this. I thought Keanu Neal was present in the run game. I thought that was really important for him. He also helped out in the zone coverages. Minkah Fitzpatrick was all over the field. He still hasn't had that big turnover play, but I think you can see his presence is bringing it. I thought that was a bogus roughing the passer call on him that which really should have changed the game for the Steelers, but instead it was a helping point for the Raiders. Patrick Peterson, he had the interception, which was really good. I felt like he could have done a little bit more in different times, especially on the deep ball where he was trying. I think he was late to understand that Minkah Fitzpatrick was taking the underneath route and he needed to get back to help Levi Wallace. So I gave him 1 star. Levi Wallace, he was targeted a lot in this game, and I almost gave him 2 stars because at the end of the day, Alan, he got you 2 interceptions and a 4th down stop on a slant over the middle. And I look at that. He also had an extra pass breakup, but I had a hard time balancing it with it when you are targeted for 2 touchdowns and you give those up, and the yards that he gave up in this game. He wasn't all on it wasn't all Devontae Adams all the time. That was always Levi Wallace, but he was a big chunk of that. But I gave him a star because I thought his bounce back was huge for the Steelers in this game.
Yeah, I think all that's pretty fair. I do think that Wallace, other than that first touchdown, which I think I agree is more on Peterson and Wallace, he's expecting help to the inside middle there, and that's where he sends Adams and he doesn't get it. I thought Wallace sort of executed the game plan. I think if you take the touchdown away, I think they're happy with what they got in terms of defending Devontae Adams. I don't think it was like I didn't see mistakes. I saw a guy playing zone coverage against a player who's frankly better than him, keeping a lid on it and making tackles. Like, to me, that's not what you want to see. but that's not a mistake. That's not an error. I did not see errors from Levi Wallace. I saw, a really good player make some plays, but he so much value in keeping in front of it, especially given the amount of splash that we've seen this defense be capable of. You just got to make him keep snapping the ball. And I think he did that at a pretty high level. The one guy on that list that I think maybe I would have given 2 stars to is Calvin Austin, because I didn't see a lot of negative to go along with that 72-yard touchdown. I understand that's only one play, and did he even have another? He had that screen pass that went nowhere because nobody blocked anybody. But he wasn't very active outside of that. But man, I mean, that's a game-changing play. I'm going to back him up for that.
That's a lot why I didn't give him 2 stars, is because if he had made like another really big play, then he would have been a 2-star guy. But 1 catch, 1 touchdown, and he had like a good game otherwise. That's why he's there. He didn't do anything bad to counterbalance. It was just he didn't get a chance to make enough noise in this game. But again, that's why he had 1 star. But Calvin Austin, also I think Joey Porter Jr. in there, he had really good coverage the one time he was really thrown at in this game. Again, he has passed all the little tests that he's gotten. But then again, we got to go through all the people here that I have on this 1-star list. George Pickens, didn't get to take over the game, but when he was called upon, he made a lot of plays, so he gets a star. James Daniels, as I said before, I thought he was the other offensive line that kind of held it up. Cole Holcomb with a huge breakup over the middle. He is continuing, I think, to grow into being the player the Steelers need in the middle part of the defense at linebacker. Montravius Adams, I thought that he kind of stepped up from some struggles he's had in the opening week, so I gave that to him. Marcus Golden had that sack, which I gave him credit for. Landon Roberts looked good against the run. He wasn't in as much. I think he had like 17 total snaps in the game, but when he was on the field, it was noticeable. Pat Freiermuth with his touchdown and his over the middle grab. If he had like one more like really big play, I was going to give him 2 stars, but it was really close. Allen Robinson made some tough catches, and Alex Highsmith getting involved as well on the defensive front. But the other guy I got to give, it's his first star of the season. It's Kenny Pickett. And, I think we got to give him credit along with everyone else on this list. Kenny Pickett did his job. Now, I didn't give him 2 stars because I didn't think he lit it up. But the throw to Calvin Austin, the touchdown pass to Pat Freiermuth, he got very lucky. Marcus Peters dropped the pick 6, and there were other moments that I thought that he could have handled better. But after that touchdown pass to Calvin Austin, I thought we saw a brand new Kenny Pickett, or not even brand new, the old Kenny Pickett we saw in training camp in the preseason, at least as seeing the field, processing, and making better decisions.
Yeah, I thought he was effective using his legs too. I thought he was really decisive about when he decided to run. Like, there was no hesitation; he just went for it. I thought he impacted the defense doing that. I think there's a lot of good. And it's weird to say this, but like, it was much better. It was good on its own, and also like there's still a lot of ways it could have been better. I think you saw like if you're concerned about Kenny Pickett in his first 2 weeks because frankly he looked pretty bad at times, then I think he kind of alleviated some of that because he looked a lot better. And if you're concerned about Kenny Pickett because you just were not a believer that he had a high enough ceiling to ever become more than he's been, I think go back and look at this tape pretty closely because there's still a lot of throws that he didn't make that he could have. There's still some feeling the rush stuff that I think there's still so much that he can get better at. And I think the combination of like, this is his best game. If you look at passer rating, this is his best game as a pro. 100 passer rating, first time. If he can do that and start to add some of these other things that I'm seeing that he's not connecting with live as it's happening, then that ceiling is pretty high. Like, I think that like, I'm not saying he's a sure thing. I'm just saying I think we need to be open to the possibility that he could turn out to be pretty good. Now, I mean, this is a grade for one game. Everything could go back to the Browns game next week, and we're having a different conversation. But I think if you're looking at what Kenny Pickett did objectively, it was both good, better than he's been, and also I think indicative of a really high ceiling if he can be even better. And there's ways that he can improve.
I agree. And I think that's the best sign the Steelers have gotten about the future of the season, the future of this franchise with him as a quarterback, was his ability to calm things down. Because again, early on, I thought there was some, oh boy, here we go again. There was that one play he bailed on the pocket early and he missed Calvin Austin with a high pass. And there was times I was like, man, like if he can just avoid those types of moments, this offense can actually go places. But when he connected with Calvin Austin, I think we saw that swagger come back. I think we saw Like you said, he used his legs more judiciously, and he was more confident in his strikes. And when he started to hit the simple passing plays, and this is what we've been talking about. This is what he didn't do against the Niners. This is what he didn't do against the Browns enough. When you hit the simple passing plays that are designed up and right there, it forced the defense to say, okay, we can't just sit on the run. The run game had a little bit of success, and that opened up play action. And then all of a sudden, now you have 3 different facets you can hit a defense with, and they have to honor them all. And then that puts them in guessing games, which gets you more open players and more chances for you to dominate the game. Again, that's why I gave Kenny Pickett 1 star. Still can be better because I think we've seen him be better. But you can't deny that was his best performance of the season for him, and maybe the best of his career. Alan, what's some thoughts that you got that you're going to be sharing on SteelersNow.com that people need to be looking out for?
I think I want to dive more into Steelers play action, why it worked, and the efficiency of Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Put those guys on the 1-star list. I really think there's something to their ability to not necessarily run at a high yards per carry, but to effectively keep the offense on schedule. I think that was an underrated part of what happened in that game.
Agreed.
And I really think that I am feeling much more confident about this offense going forward after that performance. That is the kind of game, after watching this team in OTAs and training camp and mini camp and preseason, this is the offense I was expecting to see this season. It's not perfect. They can still improve, certainly. But if they play this well they should beat most of the teams on their schedule fairly comfortably. That was a solid offensive performance.
I agree. It was the sign that there could be better days coming for this offense, and a sign that not all is doomed if they keep taking steps. And again, they got to keep working, they got to keep improving. But if they keep taking those steps, they can get to a place where the offense is more balanced and can balance with a better defense. And if Cam Hayward comes back and Deontay Johnson comes back, this team that's already in first place in their own division, the Bengals are able to win, so they're 1-2, but still they're in the first place in their own division. They're everything's right in front of them. They can handle their business and put themselves in a really good position as the season wears on. He's Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Thank you, Alan, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast for the Tuesday edition. Let us know what you thought of the Stars and Skulls grades in the comments on YouTube, or leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment on our Apple Podcast with your favorite Stars and Skulls grades that you've gotten so far. Thanks again, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.